Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas, and this is a special edition of Insight with Ashok Vyas, Insight Trend with Ashok Vyas, where we are looking at Bharat. And recently, what has caught up attention of everyone is the budget. How that budget is going to play out for the economy as well as politics of India. We will talk about that. How business is related to budget and what is happening with Adani and the report. We will take a look at that also. But let me have the pleasure of first welcoming my esteemed panelists today. I have Rajendra Harsh joining me as well as Vimal Goyal. Both
Yeah.
of you,
Namaskar.
welcome. And as I was mentioning before the show, both of you carry a lot of experience of having been in close proximity with the financial side of life as entrepreneur, as project management consultant. And so I would open up with the question in general. If you pay attention to India's budget, there is certain group of people who immediately feel elated or down. And so let us look at the categories, and I'll give I will give first two categories of those who are small business entrepreneurs as well as common call them folks in American terms. So Vimalji, is it the kind of budget which is received um, with appreciation by common man in India?
Yes, it is. This budget that was introduced by our Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is very different and from predecessors or even in the past because it has made a lot of consideration for things that have changed in India. And if you see, the GDP is very high, and she's predicting about 7% in 2023, which is very realistic. And what makes a big difference is that this budget actually changes a lot of things that happened in the past, and it gives an encouragement and incentive to invest more money in India by the multinational companies. So what is happening is this is very dynamic budget.
So I will also add to what you just said in terms of the major provisions from the budget. The total federal budget spending target raised 7.5% to 45.03 trillion rupees for 2023-24, and that is revised 41.87 trillion rupees for this current fiscal years. And Rajendra, before I come to you, I will also mention that capital spending is also increased to 33%. So that is 10 trillion rupees for 2023-24. And how this matters for a common man, we really have no direct clue. But I understand they have increased the tax slab from 5 to lakh 7 lakh rupees for the no tax to be paid. So that is a good sign. And Rajendra, do you think this is good for the big entrepreneurs? How do you see this budget?
Actually, I see this budget, and as you told very well, that the capital expenditure which has been increased, and it is a good for not only businessmen, also for the general public, and from many different point of views. Now, capital expenditure, when we say they talk about the GDP is increasing, but if you go a little bit lower, then you see that maximum increase coming to railways. Railways budget has been increased by 48.6%, and the second increase under the capital expenditure is road and highways, and that is increased by more than 25, around 25%. Now, where this railway is increasing the things, so railway and highways both are increasing, and the borders railways. So that directly affects the defense also, because once you have a better roads in the northeastern region, and in the Jammu and Kashmir region where you have the tunnels and everything which is being done, and highways being created, and better connectivity through the rail also. So that increases the defense capability of the country, number one. Number two, the railway is increasing very high, putting that money into the direct freight corridors, which directly helps the businessman for that, giving transporting their material at a very nominal cost. So one way you having a highways, is a normal person also, which is a common businessman, which is going from one place to another place, will save time and will save the petrol. At the same time, the transportation through the highways getting better, and same with the railways. So this capital expenditure, and it will generating the employment. Other thing which you have told me, that's about the increasing the slab.
Correct.
See that their whole concept of the things is they want that more money in the hands of the persons, because with the GDP increasing, you get every person who's working in the they get the more money in hand. Now we got two choices: either save it or spend it. Now once he is starting spending, in economics they say spending multiplier. So if one rupee is spent more, then five times affects or six times affects, depending on the multiplier which is being used, into the increase of the GDP. At the same time, it is a vote catching also. So the government has done a very good, say, politics as well as the good economics.
So let's learn a little bit more of the point that you just mentioned. And Vimalji, he's mentioning that the spending multiplies, and he also came up with this gross domestic product. And is this something related to what you mentioned, Rajendra? Spending multipliers, one by MPS, which
Yeah,
is marginal propensity of saving.
yeah.
So when okay. Does it really play out the way you have envisaged, Vimalji? What do you think? And allow me to elaborate the way I'm looking at it. Let's say there are certain schemes where government provides additional funding, say for employment generation. Also, like there is a scheme called Manrega. Now, if that money which is given, and sometimes they were creating projects just to kind of create some work and pay to the employee. And I know this very well from Rajasthan, because this was this was there were examples where ultimately this is not leading to anywhere. It is just that people are coming, working, getting paid, and then probably it would not result into some concrete sort of development. So does that really add to the economic cycle, Vimalji? That's the question.
Well, see, very important thing that we need to understand is the consumption, consumer. This is a big consumer economy in India, because now, in the past, it used to be we didn't have enough product, we didn't have uh, enough choices for people to buy. Now that people have cash in their hands, and also this budget is giving more money to the businesses, there is becoming a consumer economy, and that really makes a big difference. I showed you what you said. When government gives more money in the hands of people, they go out and spend, especially poor people. When you give money to poor people, mostly what they do, that money gets spent. If you give more money to rich people, they will invest or they will save. So that's the system that we use in US, that what we did in pandemic time, we gave money to all these people, and people were going out buying goods. The problem was we didn't have enough goods, so it became inflation. So one of the good things about this is, I showed you, I was a little disappointed with this budget, that it only had 6.4% deficit in the budget. India being a growing economy and a number five right now in the world, the deficit should be higher than this, because what deficit does is you don't need a surplus, you need a deficit in a country like that, because this way you put more money in the hands of people, and then it grows, and you put money in the hands of investors or industrialists, and they reinvest the money in the economy, and that brings the growth, and that's how GDP goes higher than even 7%.
You want to weigh in on this point, Rajendraji, the deficit, and let me just look at it from a common man's point of view, who is not familiar with economics. He feels that government is doing good if the deficit is reduced, because in it is like you are earning and your borrowing have a better equation in terms of government's budget. So, Rajendra, how do you see the current deficit, and is it a reason for being disappointed?
They're both the things. One is what Vimal ji is saying is perfectly right. If you have a more deficit, like in US has got over here, then it increases the economy increase because you get the more spending. But there's a difference between US and in India. If you here you increase the deficit, you print the money, and the dollar has got value and acceptance throughout the world. Now in India, if you have a deficit and you print the money, that acceptance of Indian rupee is not there into the international market. So you can't buy those things from that. And another thing that all those economy, there's rating companies which are there, Moody or all those companies which are there, they have a very strict eye, including the financial institutions, on how much fiscal deficit you have. And India also has created a law long back that has to be fiscal deficit regime, and it should be below some level. So the overall fiscal deficit has to be kept in. So if it is lower the fiscal deficit, then it's being shown that the government is more efficient and they are working in different. Now, if you see just little bit figures into this, out of 45 lakh crore of the total budget which we have, our revenue receipts are only 26 lakhs. Rest all is what we are getting a loan. Now, if you have a more deficit, how much more deficit we can digest? And that's a question for big economists. I don't think I can work on it. But right now, our total outstanding liabilities around of the GDP is 57%, and which one time increased maximum to 61%. So, looking to that, can we have more loans? Number one, because if you have a deficit, you have two things: either you take loan or you print the money. If you print the
Okay.
money, yeah, Vimalji, you're saying something, yeah.
Well, what I was saying was, Rajendra, you're right, but you have to look at it this way. U.S. is not India. India is a growing economy. U.S. has only 2.5% GDP. This year, it might even be lower. India needs money. Now, let me give you some figures, like you mentioned. The borrowing in this budget is 34%. Out of all the revenues that India is collecting, 34% is borrowed. But 20% of what they're spending is going towards interest. That means they still have 80% left that they can use if they borrow more money and pay the interest. I believe as an investor, as an entrepreneur, that borrow more, give more money in the hands of people, the poor people, the industrialists, let them make more factories, let them create more employment because India still needs more employment. That's for sure. Even though the economy has grown, you need people to get more skills and more employment. And what that will do is it will translate into a higher revenue to the government. Now, how does government get higher revenue? One example I say we need to start charging tax to the farmers, to the agriculture. Just like we have 7 lakh
No,
minimum,
I,
we need
I,
to start that.
I'm tempted to interrupt because what you are saying would put Modi government out of power even before the due time. You have to be very, very careful about the sensitive side of who you are taxing and are you going to tax farmers. I mean, you have to look at the Indian economic political scenario. But I'm kind of tempted to share the huge number of figures related to budget, and as you mentioned about the deficit and the borrowing, etc. So the total revenue receipts seen at 26.32 trillion rupees. Now we have gone to talk about trillions. Earlier trillion was very unheard or very rarely heard term. So in 2023 it has increased from 23 0.48 trillion rupees in 2022-23. And as you mentioned, government targets gross borrowing of 15.43 trillion rupees in 2023-24. The net market borrowing is 11.8 trillion rupees. You want them to borrow more, but of course it is in proportion to what is needed. But I will also come back to when government decides about the allocation, they have certain set of priorities, etc. And I'll bring to your attention quickly the uh, expenditure, or rather the provision made for defense sector, and that is 5.94 trillion rupees,
Yes.
which is increased from 5.85 trillion rupees from the previous budget provision. So I'm throwing a couple of points for both of you to respond. When India is focusing on becoming independent, on producing its own defense related equipments, and they have also demonstrated some during this 26th January. So does that reduce somehow India's need to spend more for defense budget? Rajendra, you begin with this, then I'll go to Vimalji.
So if we talking about the defense budget is one which directly affected to the defense is what are the been defense allocation has been given to the defense ministry, and that is if you see the budget is the highest in any ministry, around I think 16% of the budget. So if you include some education plus health or something, then also then they will not reach to that level of this. So if you increase more and more a defense budget, from where you take it, that's another thing important. Now, increasing defense budget, there you importing the defense machine and defense equipments or manufacturing. Manufacturing will take time, and they are working on that, and it will take time. So that's one thing. Um, so defense, they are doing whatever they can do, definitely. And if you borrow, as like Vimalji is saying, that borrowing the things, if you have increased the deficit, there's one is you borrow from the internal sources, means you issue some bonds to the general public. Now, if general public invests into your bonds, then they are saving that money. Once you are saving that money, your spending capacity reduces. So one way you are helping the government to do some more investment. Another way that your spending reduces, then the spending multiplier makes a difference on GDP. So it is GDP one way increasing, one way is reducing. Another way, you print the money. If you print the money, then inflation will be there. So that's not the thing. Third, even if we take the money from them, from public, and if you import the thing, then also GDP will reduce because it is a net exports. So exports minus imports. So basically, whatever you take money from the public, you have to invest. So in this GDP equation, if you see, if the government investment is increasing, but private consumption is reducing, net sum value is zero, or maybe net multiplier may reduce it. So basically, overall increasing the consumption. So some balance has to be there. If you don't spend money, the job will not be there. Persons will not be having more money in the salaries. So that balancing is required, and there can be any arguments what to increase and what to reduce. That's what do I think on that.
Yeah. Vimalji, before I let you say something, I just want to bring this to attention of everyone. As a layman, you would think that with such a huge population, India should be spending more on education. And what figure I just gave you, 5.93 trillion rupees for defense allocation. In comparison to this, for education, it is 1.13 trillion rupees. So, education is one fifth almost of the spending projected for defense sector. I think we should be in a position to change this scenario. But of course, security and safety is very very important. Vimal, your take.
Okay, let me just start with the prior thing that Rajendraji said. Number one, you don't have to borrow from your public. Government does not have to issue bonds like US does. And government's bonds in India will have a lower credit rating than what we have here. So in the past, the government has failed when they try to issue 10-year bond, 5-year bond, just like we do in US. The best way to borrow, there are different ways, and that's how Indian government borrows and other governments borrows. What you borrow money from, just like a social security, pension fund, provident fund, all that money sits in the bank account or sits in wherever it sits. It does. Government borrows against those funds because those funds They just come in and they sit there, and the government borrows against it, and the government pays them a certain interest. Other ways to borrow is the credibility and the credit rating of India has gone up so much. If you look at it, for the last couple of years, the Indian market has doubled or tripled. When you look at every other country, they all have gone down in the market. But I keep looking at the index, Sensex index, and it has gone up so much. My father-in-law's trust has more money than I ever thought he would. I thought I would have to fund part of it. But anyway,
So
but
congratulations to you, and you should be happy for your father-in-law. Uh,
well,
uh,
my father-in-law passed away, and then when he passed away, he created the trust, and I thought that it would be short of money.
okay.
So what I'm trying to say is the credit rating of Indian government, and credit goes to Mr. Modi and to infrastructure that's going on, all the highways and warehouses that Rajendra mentioned, they're being built, and the money is being used at the right place for the right job that it's meant for. That makes a big difference. So with all the credibility that Indian government has, I think Indian government can borrow more money, don't have to go to IMF. They can go to any other country. And here I'm showing they're borrowing almost 34% of what they budgeted here, and they're only paying 20% interest. So there's a lot more room here without risking the credibility of Indian government to borrow, because what it does is it translates into more revenue for the government.
Yeah. So, Vimalji, I think you are very, very sort of gung ho about borrowing, and maybe the way Indian government has worked out the equation between borrowing and spending, that has resulted into the kind of credibility standing or the credit worthiness of India. And in this context, it is relevant, Rajendra ji, to mention that total tax receipts would increase 12% from the previous year, and that will be 23.3 trillion rupees. So they are working on increasing their revenue, and probably the way they, of course, know better than we. Of course, we can we can discuss. But now coming to you, Rajendra ji, the big thing that has caught up everyone's attention is Hindenburg report and the way it has created bloodbath sort of situation on the market, especially with respect to Adani's different companies, and uh, I'm also tempted to mention finance minister also stated that it doesn't reflect the strength of Indian economy, and we have solid institutions, etc. So, overall, Rajendra, your take on how this Adani related matter would affect India?
So it definitely is affected and is already seen. The effect is already seen. That's not to say that it won't affect as far as the short term is concerned. But as far as the long term is concerned, it all depends how the things plays out. If the whatever we have these SEBI regulations, SEBI has reached to that level which we are today from, and they have learned a lot of lessons. Maybe in Harshad Mehta case or in Ketan Parikh case, they learned lessons, and the things have improved a lot, and it's a continuous process of evolving. But I don't see, because whatever this report is saying, those all things are well known and all those figures are well into the public domain. My take on this, that how do you interpret those things? And many times there is one thing is also going on, why this particular report at this particular time, when the follow-up offer of this is also going on of the Adani on that, and that is affected. And they are also short sellers, this company. We don't know what is their interest into that, because a short seller means a person is already sold their shares which they do not have. If somebody has sold the share when it was thing, then now they have to buy in the shares value is very going to increase a lot. They would like that to go fall and buy it. Now, is this report has been some way some way it's connected with such thing? Some of the persons they say that they're becoming short seller. That might be some connection on that, and this has give the benefit to those who have been the short selling. They have been given got the benefit out of it. Whatever I understand from, as Anand Mendra has told, and one of the on his tweets,
Yes.
uh, finance minister has told on that. And overall, what we see nowadays, that till now we have very good rules and regulations in SEBI, and there are very good professionals are sitting there. Even with all those professionals, something can happen. Nobody says that can't happen, but I don't think this is going to be a long-term effect this. And as far as the political mileage being taken by the institute, we should know that Adani has made his whole fortune started with Timan Bhai and Congress government in Gujarat. At that time, this is got started, and Congress is giving them business into Rajasthan, and Kerala Communist is giving business, and Israel also giving business. So I don't
So,
think so. It's going to affect in long term.
yeah, Vimalji, let's read this tweet by Anand Mahindra. Global media is speculating whether current challenges in the business sector will trip India's ambitions to be a global economic force. I have lived long enough to see us face earthquakes, droughts, recessions, wars, terror attacks. All I will say is never ever bet against India. I like that. What do you say?
Yeah, well, see, okay, whatever he said, Mahindra, that's his own opinion. It has nothing to do with Gautam Adani. The bottom line is this thing will go
It
away.
has to do with Adani saying in that context only. Anyway, yeah.
th- this thing will go away because the thing is that these people who sent out the report on Adani Group, they are speculators and they're bearish on it, and they did a big bet, bearish bets against the Adani, and they want to cash out. That's what they're looking to do, and it's hurting Adani. But the bottom line is this: it's a big powerhouse, and don't forget, Adani reminds me of Elon Musk, what Elon Musk does to his stock trading or his stock. Because every time they come out and make a statement, they go out, build a port, they build a factory, they do everything else. It really increases the value of their wealth or whatever they're doing. Now, this is very important. Just like I said, every company that Adani owns has very high leverage. They go out and borrow money. They buy a company and they go to the bank.
Actually, Adani listens to you. Government of India is not listening to you. Adani keeps borrowing, borrowing.
Well, see, that's how the business works, because anytime you became so powerful, then what you do is you go out and do a vertical integration. You start buying companies above you, you start buying companies below you, meaning the companies that are supplying you start buying, and the companies you're
Okay, so
selling.
we have reached to the point where we'll have to say bye bye. Only 30 seconds. Politically, you see this is going to work for Modi government, or it'll have some adverse effect. Starting with you, Rajendra, 30 seconds.
Adani, I don't think so will make any difference
No,
to
no, budget.
budget. Budget is definitely going to benefit Mr. Modi, no doubt at all. And
Okay, thank you.
government
Thank you.
project.
Vimalji, your turn.
Budget is definitely a very dynamic and very encouraging budget, and I really like what she has presented to the government, to the people, and it will definitely help Mr. Modi.
Wonderful. So, what helps Prime Minister Modi is going to help India is one way to look at it. It may not help the opposition, but it should help India whichever way it works. Looks like things are in sync with India's growth trajectory, with a little bit of shake-ups here and there. Rajendraji, thank you very much. Vimalji, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for being
Thanks
a
a lot.
part of
Thanks a
this
lot.
enlightening conversation. Thanking my panelists and thanking all of you for being with us.